Well, welcome back, everybody. This is the day after I showed you the big problems. This is the first time this one's stalled since I've done this. So, alright. Remember how I was saying that when wheels are out of gauge, it does cause a big headache? It does. Now, this one here, like I said, I've gone through, I've taken it completely apart and everything. There was only one thing I knew was off, and I cleaned up all the contact bars, got all that wheel blackener off there because it is not conductive. That's a Broadway limited import. It is now sitting at speed step 1, and it's been doing all right. Now, it's been still stalling out a little bit here and there, but guess what I just did? Today, I went and got me a new NMRA standards gauge. That'll ever focus. Hello. See, I don't know what's going on with my phone. But yeah, I got me a new NMRA standards gauge. Not because there was something wrong with the old one, except for the fact I can't find the old one. I've had mine for many years, and it finally just decided to grow legs. I don't know where it went. But yeah, that's at speed step 1. It's been going across turnouts and everything without stalling, really, except for when it hits a really bad spot in the track, because I still have not gone back and re-cleaned the track with the same process again. My track is fine, I know, because everything else works, except for my 2 BLI locomotives. Now, this one here I have not readjusted from factory at all. Alright. I'm going to pause this and restart it because I don't know why it's not focusing. So I must have some dust on the lens. Well, that's almost did an upside down video on you guys. Okay. NMRA standards gauge. Alright. That one there's alright. This one here I can feel a little resistance, so I know that that's off. A little resistance there as well, so the wheels are too narrow. This one here is perfect. I already checked that. This one here is still too narrow. This one here is okay. I've never adjusted these from factory settings, okay? Do you hear that? Do you see the tender picking up? Sorry. See how the whole tender picks up? That one there must be alright. You see that? That is way too narrow. Even though it fits in the wheel gauge, if you could pick up on the wheels, there's a problem there. And yeah, that one there sticks too, so. Yeah. My tender wheels were actually riding over my frogs instead of through my frogs because they were so narrow. That was causing a lot of headache. I've gone through and I've checked all my flange ways, all my points, including my wheel gauge, and there's a spot where the old track is where that barely slips in. Alright. Now, this normally $10, but now they raised the price up to $22. So I don't think I'm ever going to be buying another one. If I lose this, I'm going through and I'm just grabbing the measurements and going off the website, because this is getting ridiculous. For a piece of stamped steel, they now want $22. NMRA, I know you're hurting for members, but this is probably why. Even your membership is getting a bit exaggerated. Now, I know we're going through an economic flux right now because of inflation, but this is 20 cents a steel. It doesn't matter how many points you put on there or anything else. I know that this is 20 cents a steel, and it can be stamped out for about 30 cents a piece. So somebody's making a killing. And I know it ain't me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-gauge these wheels. That's the only thing I've done with 28, which is now sitting there spinning wheels, but it's on a low point in the track. And there it goes. And you see how it's not jumping around, jumping up and down through that re-railer? It's because the wheels are now engaged. So we won't even see a jump from the tender, which we was seeing before, where the tender would actually ride up and over the re-railer. And I do need to adjust the spring on that pony truck. I don't know if this was from shipping and it got slammed down and just all the wheels went narrow. Maybe we can blame the shipper, not the actual company. But there was a piece of foam between these wheels that should have kept them engaged. I believe this was a factory mess up, especially with the heavy dose of wheel black that wound up killing it and making it not want to run. That's a dirty spot in the track. I need to add a feeder in between those two turnouts so that way I can improve that. But that's literally just power going through joints, so I can expect that. There is feeders on these tracks, so I just need to add feeders on that short stretch there, just next to that turnout. Also, still need to add feeders to the turntable and feeders to all the tracks inside the roundhouse. I've not gotten to that yet. I'm not too concerned about that. And that bridge that I made, I'm trying to find time to do the video to actually do that for you on video so that you can see what an old 1890s wood bridge would have been, or previous, because they did make thousands of them all up and down the eastern seaboard. Now, they worked fine, except for sometimes they would catch on fire. So they would hold a good load. They would hold well over several hundred tons to get across it. So it was a good design. I just think the wood would rot too fast, so they got rid of them as quickly as possible. No, I haven't brought out the Interstate Fuel and Oil for that yet for Madison Fuels. You know, everything's still here. Now, I've got an idea when it comes to these dice. Now, yes, I know a single is a die, but I'm doing a loads in, empties out operation. Oh, it just fired back up. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit stop and F8 on that, so that way you can hear me over top of the train. So, okay. So, let's say I got my hopper cars back here. Well, somebody's got to switch this. I'm not using a car card system because the cars that leave off the two main tracks, not this track, because this track is designated for another purpose, and I'll explain that in a minute. But okay, you got this to switch. Well, you got the nice little riverbank here, so we got a spot to do this once I clear it off. All right, I want to know how many cars I'm pulling out of there and take it to the yard. Well, I'll be taking 8 cars. This gives me a random number between 2 and 12. So anytime somebody's over here, it's pretty much like shooting a game of craps. I'd be pulling 5 cars out. I'd be pulling 10 cars out. So that would be for the mine. And the same with the power plant. If the power plant's got that many cars unloaded, they're doing the same thing. Now, I was thinking, because 12 cars is actually pretty much my limit. Oh, look, I'd be taking 6 out of the power plant. And I can roll it right on the rivers. That doesn't matter. So I'd have 6 leaving the power plant empty to go back over to the coal mine, and I'd have 10 coming out of the coal mine to go over to the yard. You see how that could choke up the yard as well as these industries, because I could wind up pulling so many cars out of here and have so little coming out of here in an operating session that I wind up with a backlog where I've got coal overflowing in the yard and the power plant ain't calling for none, which is actually realistic because power plants, they usually keep in storage at least 3 days. 3 days of coal in storage. They don't like to have more than that in the area because they're a flammable business. You don't want to keep more flammable equipment where you have a risk of things catching on fire. So what they try to do is they limit the amount so that way if it does catch on fire, the fire company can actually put it out in a reasonable amount of time. So if they're not calling for a lot of loads because they've got a stockpile that's already good, they're still producing and trying to get it to that power plant. Well, production's good here. The demand is low. And that would be realistic, just like some days. They might have to move to catch the vein again, so they could be running 1, maybe 2 cars, or, let's put 3 there. And these guys over here, well, they're starting to get low because their power plant and their main source of coal is down for a little bit. So they're calling for 9 loaded cars. Well, if I can only pull 3 from here, I'm stuck because obviously they've got 9 empties coming out, which will be stacked in that yard ready to go over here. And they'll come over there, yes, but I'm only pulling out 3 cars to go back to the yard. So it's a really realistic type of operation for that loads in, empties out. And it always makes sure that I have random amounts coming in and out of each industry. So I'll have random amounts stacked in this yard ready to go to one of those 2 industries. You got to remember that this track, which is my longest yard track, is calling for the coal and the empty loads. Then I have my north, east, southwest, and my passenger cars. And how I do that is north and west is on one track, south and east is on another track, and then I have overflow here on this yard. So I've got coal to be stacked on these 2. One's for loaded, one's for empty. And then I have my north and westbound traffic, my south and eastbound traffic, then my overflow for those 2, as well as my passenger track clear back here on this end. So you wind up with what could be a rather full yard. Now tonight's video is getting a little bit long, but I just wanted to let you know I did fix the problem with the BLI locomotives. It's taken me a while, yes. I did have to disassemble them completely. Now I know I've never touched the tender trucks, so for them to be that tight on the gauge that I could pick up that entire tender, there's a big problem. These could be done by me, just the drivers, because I had to pull them apart in order to get down to the bushings to clean the middle black off the bushings so that way it would make contact better. Alright, that was my second time tearing down both locomotives, and that was right before I shot the last video. And they still ran poorly. However, the Kato, the Model Power, the Bachmann back there, all ran just fine. So I knew it was something with the BLI, and I just found what could have been my entire problem the whole time, but the middle blackening was giving me very high resistance levels. And I mean very high resistance levels. I couldn't believe how high those resistance levels were. Now I did find out that they are all hooked together with just a middle plastic slug in the middle. On the axles are middle, the wheels are middle. As long as the contacts are on bare metal, we're good. That's why I left the wheel black on the wheel faces. But I had to polish all that wheel black off the treads except for the traction tire wheels. I had to get all that metal black off, which I did, except for a very thin amount, which is negligible. I believe I've only got a little bit there on the outside edges of a couple of them. And then reassemble them all, put them all back together the first time, to find out later when I pulled it apart the second time to figure out why in the world I was not getting anything on my ohms reader between any of these two wheels. I was actually checking every wheel and I couldn't get a reading. So I knew somewhere between here and the frame I was literally not getting anything, because it wasn't going to the frame and back out the other wheel. When I took it apart the second time, all these brass bushings that sit in the middle there that ride on the middle slots to actually gather the electricity in the locomotive and run it back to the DCC board, they all had metal black on them. They no longer have metal black on them. I don't know if you could see them in the video. I don't think there's a possibility. But they're all brass now. Why? Because I soaked them in mineral spirits overnight to clean them. Then I pulled them out the next day, brushed them all off with a toothbrush. All that metal black came off. They're now making such good contact that I get overload, meaning absolutely no resistance, between this wheel and the wheel with the traction tire even. So we're getting really good conductivity here. But the issue back here is anytime that it goes through points being that narrow, it's going to short out. Anytime it's got to go through a frog, it's going to lift up and cause problems there. So it was just time that all needed to be adjusted and properly done. So without me rambling on anymore, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, fix this one. We know that 28's working just fine now. Let's get 26 working like it should. I'm finally done getting this wheel black off of everything, I hope. And yeah, I'm just not going to buy another BLI locomotive. One, I pay $250 for them a piece to start with. Two, here I am, 2 months into owning them, finally getting them to work right. That's too much of an expense to still have a month's worth of 1 hour days repairing and repairing and repairing what should have never been had to be touched to begin with. So I'm going back to work on this layout. Y'all have a good one. As I said, there goes 26, running just fine. You know, a lot of conductivity issues actually happen with wheel gauge, as you can see. You know, some spots still need to be cleaned on 26. I don't know what's taking. Oh, it derailed a little bit. That should be able to be fixed next re-railer. Maybe not. And the front truck should be fixed. Nope. Alright, I'd have to say that there's still a wheel out of gauge there. But running a lot better. A lot can be said about gauging your wheels. Just a simple gauging of the wheels can actually yield amazing results when it comes to poor runners. So, let's see if I can get. Yep, I just shorted. There's play. So, yeah. There's play, but not a lot. So, I don't know why it shorted. I can't find short in any of the wires. And it's only 26 when it's running, that every now and again it will short. So, I've got to figure that one out. Maybe I need to put some washers on the rear tender to separate it just a little bit more, because I think the wheels are rubbing on the bottom of the tender, causing a short. But there you go. 90% of my problem was fixed just by simply making sure the wheels were engaged. So make sure your wheels are engaged. Now, I had a comment about somebody that wasn't too happy about me running my layout out here in this tent. Said that condensation was my big problem, and that's the biggest problem with all electronics. Now, water is actually not one of the big problems with electronics. You can ask any G-scaler or anything else. The problem is not corrosion on the inner contacts. When wires are hard connected, they hardly ever fail. You can submerge your locomotives in water, pull them out, oil them up, make sure that all the contacts are good and clean, and they'll run. When the contacts are already poor from factory, it does take a little bit of work to get them working right. Now, as long as your contacts are clean, you're fine. Matter of fact, there's been many cases where water's helped actually improve conductivity. It's the corrosion that's the problem. Water's actually very conductive. So you wind up with corrosion being a side effect of water from the oxygen in the water. That's where you wind up with problems. G-scalers will tell you this. HO scale guys that run the trains outside will tell you this. I'm not the first guy to try running an N-scale layout outdoors at all. I'm probably the first guy that's ever put one into a tent. But they run them outside in their garden like this, on oak planks and stuff like that in their garden. In Germany and in the UK and stuff like that, N-scale outdoors is not a new thing. Many have done it. The locomotives and all are usually stored in garden sheds where moisture is also a big problem. They don't get corrosion because the moisture that happens inside of the building, when it gets hot, evaporates and goes out of the building. Now in the wintertime, yeah, that corrosion can be a little bit more of a problem, but for the most part, as long as you're not getting directly submerged in water, you normally do not have a corrosion problem if it's wet, dry, wet, dry. You have a corrosion problem when things rust. And that will happen out here in this tent. I can't deny that. It will happen. I just don't have the room indoors. I live in a very small house. The largest room in my house, all right, is my master bedroom, and that's 8 by 12 feet. So if I was to put this into that room, I would have a foot there and a foot there to the end of the room. Not a very big room. The children's bedroom, same deal. It's 8 by 12 feet. The second child's bedroom is 8 by 8 feet. My living room is 11 by 11 feet. There's not even enough room in my living room for this to sit sideways. My kitchen, same deal, 11 by 11 feet. My house is small. It's a single wide mobile home that has had an 8 by 12 foot addition to one side, and the kids' bedroom has been widened. That's it. Now, I have 7 children. When all of us are actually in this house, it is impossible to move. Why would I try to cram this layout into there? This layout is built to go to shows like Timonium Fairgrounds in Baltimore, Maryland. Things like that. I can pack this up, put it in the bed of my truck, roll down there, set it up in a day, and be ready for the entire weekend. Once the show's over, I can tear it down, put it back in the bed of my truck, and roll home. That's what I designed this layout to do. When I'm at home with it, I want to be able to set it up and run it like I was running any other layout. Those end tracks there are for when I finally do have a home. I can actually expand this and run much longer trains, still have this so I can use the yard and stuff like that, and just disconnect this from the main layout, run it to a show, run it back home, and be done with it. I can set this back up in my basement the same day I come home, connect it in with the rest of my layout, bam, done, ready to go. Now, corrosion's not an issue. I've got brass track that shows the same amount of corrosion as if it was in somebody's damp basement. Matter of fact, less corrosion than I've seen in some damp basements. So for you to be sitting there and telling me that I'm wrong for running my trains the way I'm running my trains, if you had the limited resources that I have, I don't even think you would be in the hobby. I am literally building this entire thing on a shoestring budget. I have spent less than $40 on my phone. I have spent less than $100 on all the lumber that I've used. I've spent probably $250 in total on FlexTrack. Now, I've spent probably about $700 on turnouts, but I started with going to the train show and doing the track plan with turnouts that date all the way back to the 1970s. This one here might look familiar. It's a Bachmann brass track. This one here is an Atlas brass track that dates back to the 60s. This one here again is an Atlas brass turnout. That's brass rail. It looks nothing like my nickel silver, which is hard to find right now. Here's my nickel silver. You see how shiny that is? You see how dull the brass is? Don't complain about somebody else's layout ever. Alright? I've been at this hobby since I was 8 years old. I know things get expensive. I know because I've been in this hobby this long. I have never once complained about somebody else's layout. I've given them options to do something a little bit cheaper that they were spending a lot of money on. I've never told them they're doing anything wrong with their layout. Because quite frankly, we all do the best we can as modelers. Anybody that wants to badmouth another modeler shows their lack of skills. I'm outside, I'm in a shed, and I'm still able to run in-scale trains like if I was running indoors. Now, you're telling me that my complaints over electrical pickups, which I just fixed, so I know it was electrical pickups on these 2 locomotives. That's all it was, electrical pickups. You're telling me I don't know how to run a model railroad. I've been at this for almost 2 decades. Well, almost 3 decades now. I'm almost 38 years old. I've been doing this over 2 decades. HONZGO TT scale. I actually got into that for a little while. I did 2 layouts for somebody on tabletop train scale. Built them and shipped them to the owner. If somebody would like me to build them a coffee table layout or something like that, I am more than happy to jump on that bandwagon. If somebody asks me about wiring techniques and stuff like that, I'm more than happy to draw them out a wiring diagram. I'm more than happy to solder up a complete system with a double pole, double throw switch to throw Kato turnouts, to throw Atlas turnouts, everything. I am more than happy to take time to do this stuff for free. Why? Because this is the greatest hobby in the world. I have the best of friends in this hobby. Have I once said something negative about somebody's layout? Probably. But then I get to thinking about it later, and I sit there and go, how much time, how much effort did they go through? How much trouble did this little problem actually give them? And I go, wait a minute. Why am I making a complaint? They probably spent over 100 hours trying to get this right. And I just made them feel like crap in 5 minutes. How many things have you spent 100 hours on and got it looking the way you wanted it to look, the way you thought it would be, to have somebody else shoot it down? I've spent almost 3 decades now working on layouts, and nothing will drive somebody out of the hobby faster than a rivet counter or somebody that thinks they have a better way. You can make a suggestion. Don't file a complaint.